first affronted the abyss, daring to journey through the eternal night. Armored with light, she advanced her foot to plunge into the dread and shoeless vacancy.
So we begin again. Satyavan has passed in Savitri's arms, and death has come to take him, his soul, away into his realm of darkness. Savitri undergoes a tremendous change as this occurs. And I'm going to read a little bit from the last canto, starting near the bottom of 572. It says, "A presence was there that filled the listening world. A central all assumed her boundless life. A sovereignty, a silence, and a swiftness. One brooded over abysses. Who was she? As in a choric robe of unheard sounds, a force descended, trailing endless lights, linking time's seconds to infinity. Illimitably, it girt the earth and her. It sank into her soul, and she was changed. Then, like a thought fulfilled by some great word, that mightiness assumed a symbol form. Her being's spaces quivered with its touch. It covered her as with immortal wings. On its lips, the curve of the unuttered truth. A halo of wisdom's lightnings for its crown. It entered the mystic lotus in her head, 1,000-petaled home of power and light. Immortal leader of her mortality, doer of her works, and fountain of her words. Invulnerable by time, omnipotent. It stood above her, calm, immobile, mute. All in her mated with that mighty hour, as if the last remnant had been slain by death of the humanity that once was hers. So this profound descent of power and light comes into her, and she is changed, and now ready to confront death. As that canto continued, the first canto, they began moving into death's realm of darkness. So now we began reading through Canto 2, and we're just reading through the first time, and then after we finish, we'll return back and comment. So let's continue reading from page 584, the fourth line down. And sir, would you like to begin? You read.
This one. There was no course, no path, no end or goal. Visionless, she moved amid insensible gulfs, or dropped through some great black unknowing waste, or whirled in a dumb eddy of meeting winds. assembled by the titan hands of chance. There was none with her in the dreadful vast. She saw no more the vague, tremendous God. Her eyes had lost their luminous Satyavan. Yet, not for this her spirit failed, but held more deeply than the bounded senses can, which grasp externally and find to lose its object loved. So, when on earth they lived, she had felt him straying through the glades, a scene in her, its clefts, her being's vistas, opening their secrets to his search and joy. Because to jealous sweetness in her heart, whatever happy space his cherished feet preferred must be at once her soul embracing. His body, passioning dumbly to his trade, but now.
Thank you. Margaret, will you continue? Margaret.
But now a silent gulf between them came, and to abysmal loneliness she fell, even from herself cast out, from love remote. Long hours, since long it seems when sluggish time is measured by the throbs of the soul's pain, in an unreal darkness, empty and rare, she travelled, treading on the corpse of life, lost in the blindness of extinguished souls. Solitary in the anguish of the void, she lived in spite of death, she conquered still. In vain her puissant being was oppressed, her heavy long monotony of pain, tardily of its fierce self-tortured tired. At first, a faint, inextinguishable gleam, pale but immortal, flickered in the gloom, as if a memory came to spirits dead, a memory that wished to live again, dissolved from mind in nature's natal sleep. It wandered like a lost ray of the moon, revealing to the night her soul of dread. Serpentine, in the gleam the darkness lulled, its black hoods jeweled with a mystic glow. Its dull sleek folds shrank back and coiled and slid, as though they felt all ill a cruel pain and suffered from the pale approach of hope.
Thank you. Nara.
Night sailed her heavy somber rain, the splendor of some bright eternity. The threatened with this faint beam of wandering truth, her empire of everlasting naught. Implacable in her intolerant strength, and confident that she alone was true, she strove to strive the frail, dangerous ray. Aware of all negativing immensity, she reared her giant head of nothingness, her mouth of darkness swallowing all that is. She saw in herself the tenebrous absolute. But still the light prevailed, and still it grew, and Savitri to her lost self awoke. Her limbs refused the cold embrace of death. Her heartbeats triumphed in the grasp of pain. Her soul persisted, claiming for its joy. The soul of the beloved now seen no more. Before her, in the stillness of the world, once more she heard the treading of a god, and out of the dumb darkness, Satyavan, her husband, grew into a luminous shade.
Thank you.
Then a sound pealed through the dead monstrous realm, vast like the surge in a tired swimmer's ears, clamoring a fatal iron-hearted roar. Death mission to the night is his little call. This is my silent, dark immensity. This is home of everlasting night. This is the secrecy of nothingness, entombing the vanity of life's desires. Hast thou beheld thy source, O transient art, and known from what the dream thou art was made? In the stark insincerity of nude emptiness, hopest thou still always to last and love? The woman answered not, her spirit refused. The voice of the night that knew and death that thought, in her beginningless infinity, through her soul's reaches unconfined she gazed. She saw the undying fountains of her life. She knew herself eternal without birth.
Thank you.
But still opposing her with endless night, death, the dire god, inflicted on her eyes the immortal calm of his tremendous gaze. Although thou hast survived the unborn void, which never shall forgive while time endures, the primal violence that fashioned thought, forcing the immobile vast to suffer and live. This sorrowful victory only hast thou won, to live for a little without Satyavan. What shall the ancient goddess give to thee, who helps thy heartbeats? Only she prolongs the nothing dreamed existence, and delays with the labor of living thy eternal sleep. A fragile miracle of thinking clay, armed with illusions, walks the child of time. To fill the void around he feels and dreads, the void he came from and to which he goes. He magnifies his self and names it God. He calls the heavens to help his suffering hopes. He sees above him with a longing heart, bare spaces more unconscious than himself, that have not even his privilege of mind, and empty of all but their unreal blue, and peoples them with bright and merciful powers.
Thank you.
For the sea roars around him, and earth quakes beneath his steps, and fire is at his doors, and death prowls baying through the woods of life. Moved by the presences with which he yearns, he offered in implacable shrines his soul, and clothes all with the beauty of his dreams. The gods who watch the earth with sleeping eyes and guide its giant stumblings through the void have given to man the burden of his mind. In his unwilling heart they have lit their fires and sown in it incurable unrest. His mind is a hunter upon tracks unknown, amusing time with vain discovery. He deepens with thought the mystery of his fate, and turns to song his laughter and his tears. His mortality vexing with the immortal stream, troubling his transience with the infinite's breath, they gave him hungers which no food can fill. He is the cattle of the shepherd's gods. His body, the tether with which he is tied, they cast for fodder grief and hope and joy. His pasture ground they have fenced with ignorance.
Thank you.
Into his fragile, undefended breast, they have breathed a courage that is met by death. They have given a wisdom that is mocked by night. They have traced a journey that foresees no goal. Aimless man toils in an uncertain world, lulled by inconstant pauses of his pain, scourged like a beast by the infinite desire, bound to the chariot of the dreadful gods. But if thou still canst hope and still wouldst laugh, return to thy body's shell, thy tie to earth, and with thy heart's little remnant try to live. Hope not to win back to thee, Satyavan. Yet since thy strength deserves no trivial crown, gifts I can give to soothe thy wounded life. The pacts which transient beings make with fate, and the wayside sweetness earth-bound hearts would pluck, these, if thy will accepts, make freely thine. Choose a life's hopes for thy deceiving price.
Thank you.
As ceased the ruthless and tremendous voice, unendingly there rose in Savitri, like moonlit riches on a shuddering flood, a stir of thoughts out of some silence born across the sea of her dumb, fathomless heart. At last she spoke, her voice was heard by night. I bow not to thee, O huge mask of death, black lie of night to the cowed soul of man, unreal, inescapable end of things, thou grim jest played with the immortal spirit. Consciously of immortality I walk, a victor spirit, conscious of my force. Not as a suppliant to thy gates I came. Unslain I have survived the clutch of night. My first strong grief moves not my seated mind. My unwept tears have turned to pearls of strength. I have transformed my ill-shaped brittle clay into the hardness of a statued soul. Now in the wrestling of the splendid gods, my spirit shall be obstinate and strong against the vast refusal of the world.
Thank you. I'll read one section. I stoop not with the subject mob of minds who run to glean with eager, satisfied hands and pick from its mire mid many trampling feet its scornful, small concessions to the weak. Mine is the labor of the battling gods, imposing on the slow, reluctant years the flaming will that reigns beyond the stars. They lay the law of mind on matter's works and win the soul's wish from earth's inconscient force. First, I demand whatever Satyavan, my husband, waking in the forest's charm, out of his long, pure childhood's lonely dreams, desired and had not for his beautiful life. Give if thou must, or if thou canst, refuse. Death bowed his head in scornful, cold assent. The builder of this dreamlike earth for man, who has mocked with vanity all gifts he gave. Now we'll continue.
Uplifting his disastrous voice, he spoke. Indulgent to the dreams my touch shall break, I yield to his blind father's longing heart. Kingdom and power and friends and greatness lost, and royal trappings for his peaceful age. I parried palms of man's declining days, silvered decadent glories of life's fall. The one who wiser grew by adverse fate, goods I restore, the deluded soul prefers. To impersonal nothingness bear sublime, the senses solace of the light I give, to eyes which could have found a larger realm, a deeper vision in the fathomless night. For that this man desired and asked in vain, while still he lived on earth and cherished hope. Back from the grandeur of my perilous realms, go mortal, to thy small permitted sphere. Hasten swift footed, lest to slay thy life. The great laws thou hast violated, moved. Open at last on thee their marvel eyes.
Thank you.
But Savitri answered to the disdainful shade, World spirit, I was thy equal spirit born. My will too is a law, my strength a god. I'm immortal in my mortality. I tremble not before the immobile gaze of the unchanging marble hierarchies that look with the stone eyes of law and fate. My soul can meet them with its living fire. Out of thy shadow give me back again into earth's flowering spaces Satyavan, in the sweet transiency of human limbs, to do with him my spirit's burning will. I will bear with him the ancient mother's load. I will follow with him earth's path that leads to God. Ere shall the eternal spaces open to me, while round us strange horizons far recede, traveling together the immense unknown. For I have trod with him the tracts of time, can meet behind his steps whatever night or unimaginable stupendous dawn breaks on our spirits in the untrod beyond. Wherever thou leadst his soul, I shall pursue.
Thank you.
But to her claim opposed, unplacable, insisting on the immutable decree, insisting on the unmitigable law, and the insignificance of created things. Out of the ruling wastes of night there came, born from the enigma of the unknowable depths, a voice of majesty and appalling scorn. As when the storm-haired Titan striding sea throws on a swimmer its tremendous laugh, remembering all the joy its waves have drowned. So from the darkness of the sovereign night, against the woman's boundless heart arose the almighty cry of universal death. Hast thou God's wings or feet that tread my stars, frail creature with the courage that aspires, forgetting thy bounds of thought, thy mortal role? Their orbs were coiled before thy soul was formed. I, death, created them out of my void. All things I have built in them and I destroy. I made the worlds my net, each joy a mesh. A hunger amorous of its suffering prey, life that devours, my image see in things.
Thank you.
Mortal, whose spirit is my wandering breath, whose transience was imagined by my smile, flee clutching thy poor gains to thy trembling breast. Pierced by my pangs, time shall not soon appease. Blind slave of my deaf foes, whom I compel to sin that I may punish to desire, that I may scourge thee with despair and grief, and thou come bleeding to me at the last. Thy nothingness recognized, my greatness known. Turn nor attempt forbidden happy fields, meant for the souls that can obey my law, lest in their somber shrines they tread awake from their uneasy iron-hearted sleep, the furies who avenge fulfill desire. Dread lest in skies where passion hoped to live. The unknown's lightnings start and terrified, lone, sobbing, hunted by the hounds of heaven. A wounded and forsaken soul thou flee through the long torture of the centuries, nor many lives exhaust the tireless wrath. Hell cannot slake or nor heaven's mercy assuage. I will take from thee the black eternal grip, clasping in thy heart thy fate's exiguous dole. Depart in peace, if peace for man is just.
Thank you.
But Savitri answered, meeting scorn with scorn, the mortal woman to the dreadful Lord. Who is this God imagined by thy night, contemptuously creating worlds disdained? Who made for vanity the brilliant stars? Not he who has reared his temple in my thoughts and made his sacred floor my human heart. My God is will and triumphs in his paths. My God is love and sweetly suffers all. To him I have offered hope for sacrifice and gave my longings as a sacrament. Who shall prohibit or hedge in his course the wonderful, the charioteer, the swift? A traveler of the million roads of life, his steps familiar with the lights of heaven, tread without pain the sword-paved courts of hell. There he descends to edge eternal joy. Love's golden wings have power to fan thy void. The eyes of love gaze star-like through death's night. The feet of love tread naked hardest worlds. He labors in the depths, exults on the heights. He shall remake thy universe, O death.
Thank you.
She spoke, and for a while no voice replied. While still they traveled through the trackless night, and still that gleam was like a pallid eye troubling the darkness with its doubtful gaze. Then once more came a deep and perilous pause in that unreal journey through blind naught. Once more a thought, a word in the void arose, and death made an answer to the human soul. What is thy hope? To what dost thou aspire? This is thy body's sweetest lure of bliss, assailed by pain, a frail, precarious form, to please for a few years thy faltering sense with honey of physical longings and the heart's fire, and a vain oneness seeking to embrace the brilliant idol of a fugitive hour. And thou, what art thou, soul, thou glorious dream of brief emotions made and glittering thoughts, a thin dance of fireflies speeding through the night, a sparkling ferment in life's sunlit mire? Wilt thou claim immortality, O heart, crying against the eternal witnesses that thou and he are endless powers and last? Death only lasts, and the inconscient void. I only am eternal and endure.
Thank you.
I am the shapeless, formidable vast. I am the emptiness that man call space. I am a timeless nothingness carrying all. I am the illimitable, the mute alone. I, death, am he. There is no other God. All from my depths are born, they live by death. All to my depths return and are no more. I have made a world by my inconscient force. My force is nature that creates and slays. The hearts that hope, the limbs that long to live. I have made man her instrument and slave. His body I made my banquet, his life my food. Man has no other help but only death. He comes to me at his end for rest and peace. I, death, am the one refuge to thy soul. The gods to whom men prays can help not man. They are my imaginations and my moods, reflected in him by illusion's power. That which thou seest as thy immortal self is a shadowy icon of my infinite. Is death indeed dreaming of eternity?
Thank you.
I am the immobile in which all things move. I am the nude inane in which they cease. I have no body and no tongue to speak. I commune not with human eye and ear. Only thy thought gave a figure to my void. Because, O aspirant to divinity, thou callest me to wrestle with thy soul. I have assumed a face, a form, a voice. But if there were a being witnessing all, how should he help thy passionate desire? Aloof he watches, sole and absolute, indifferent to thy cry in nameless calm. His being is pure, unwounded, motionless, one. One endless watches the inconscient scene where all things perish, as the foam the stars. The one lives forever. There no Satyavan changing was born, and there no Savitri claims from brief life her bribe of joy. There love came, never with his fretful eyes of tears, nor time is there, nor the vain vast of space. It wears no living face, it has no name, no gaze, no heart that throbs. It asks no second to aid its being or to share its joys. It is delight immortally alone. If thou desirest immortality, be then alone sufficient to thy soul. Live in thyself, forget the man thou lovest. My last grand death shall rescue thee from life. Then shalt thou rise into thy unmoved source.
Thank you. And I'll read again. But Savitri replied to the dread voice, O death, who reasonest, I reason not. Reason that scans and breaks, but cannot build, or builds in vain because she doubts her work. I am, I love, I see, I act, I will. Death answered her, one deep surrounding cry. Know also, knowing thou shalt cease to love and cease to will, delivered from thy heart. So shalt thou rest forever and be still, consenting to the impermanence of things. But Savitri replied for man to death, when I have loved forever, I shall know. Love in me knows the truth all changings mask. I know that knowledge is a vast embrace. I know that every being is myself, and every heart is hidden the myriad one. I know the calm transcendent bears the world. the veiled inhabitant, the silent Lord. I feel his secret act, his intimate fire. I hear the murmur of the cosmic voice.
I know my coming was a wave from God, for all his sons were conscient in my birth, and one who loves in us came veiled by death. Then was man born among the monstrous stars, towered with a mind and heart to conquer thee. In the eternity of his ruthless will, sure of his empire and his armored might, like one disdaining violent helpless words, from victim lips, death answered not again. He stood in silence and in darkness wrapped, a figure motionless, a shadow vague. Girt with the terrors of his secret sword, half seen in clouds appeared a somber face. Night's dusk tiara was his matted hair. The ashes of the pyre his forehead's sign, once more a wanderer in the unsending night. Blindly forbidden by dead, vacant eyes, she travelled through the dumb, unhoping wastes. Around her rolled the shuddering waste of gloom, its swallowing emptiness and joyless death, resentful of her thought and life and love. Through the long fading night, by her compelled, gliding half seen on their unearthly path, phantasmal in the dimness moved the three.
Okay, thank you. Now we can go back to the beginning of the canto, page 582. And Margaret, you can start.
The journey in eternal night and the voice of the darkness. A while on the chill, dreadful edge of night, all stood as if a world were doomed to die, and waited on the eternal silence brink. Heaven leaned towards them like a cloudy brow of menace through the dim and voiceless hush. A thought stand mute on a despairing verge, where the last depths plunge into nothingness, and the last dreams must end. They paused. In their front were glooms like shadowy wings, behind them pale, the lifeless evening was a dead man's gaze. Hungry beyond, the night desired her soul, but still in its lone niche of templed strength, motionless, her flame-bright spirit, mute erect, burned like a torch fire from a windowed room, pointing against the darkness' sombre breast. The woman first affronted the abyss, daring to journey through the eternal night. Armored with light, she advanced her foot to plunge into the dread and viewless vacancy. Immortal, unapparelled, her spirit faced the danger of the rustless, eyeless waste. Against night's inky ground they stirred, molding mysterious motion on her human tread, a swimming action and a drifting march, like figures moving before eyelids closed. All is in dreams when slipping, gliding on.
Thank you. We'll pause there. So here they begin descending into the darkness. And Sri Aurobindo beautifully describes the scene where it's a terror, kind of a dreadful night before them, into which she's ready to plunge. As thoughts stand mute on a despairing verge, where the last depths plunge into nothingness, and the last dreams must end. They paused. In their front were glooms like shadowy wings. Behind them, pale, the lifeless evening was a dead man's gaze. So she's entering into this terrible darkness, and yet she carries this light with her, and she's unappalled, unafraid. She senses her own immortality, so she's not afraid. The woman first affronted the abyss, daring to journey through the eternal night. Armored with light, she advanced, her foot to plunge into the dread and hueless vacancy. So it's very dark, very terrible. Yeah, Margaret?
Line hungry beyond what Sri Aurobindo's, I say, vision or thinking is behind. It is
hungry beyond the night desired her soul. Yeah, it's as if this darkness of death is awaiting us, is hungry to take our lives into itself. So we, in our transient lives, persist for this short time, but this eternal night, this darkness is there still, hungering for our lives to take it into itself and devour us. So that's the sense that Sri Aurobindo gives of the menace and the terror associated with this death, that's just waiting to take us into itself, into its darkness. It's as if it's not just something passive, but also a kind of an active hunger is there to end life. But she is unafraid and steps into this black darkness against the night's inky ground. They stirred. And then he describes this movement into the darkness as a swimming action. It's all kind of vague, Nothing is seen. This movement, a drifting march, like figures moving before eyelids closed, all as in dreams when slipping, gliding on. There's also this kind of unconsciousness. So it's all kind of like a dream, not this stark waking alertness. So we'll continue. All right.
The rock gate's heavy walls were left behind, as if through passages of receding time, present and past into a timeless lapse. Arrested upon dim adventure's brink, the future ended drowned in nothingness. Amid collapsing shapes they wound obscure, the fading vestibules of a tenebrous world. Receive them where they seem to move and yet be still, nowhere advancing yet to pass. A dumb procession of dim picture bounds, not conscious forms threading a real scene. A mystery of terror's boundlessness, gathering its hungry strength, the huge pitiless void, surrounded slowly with its soundless depths, and monstrous, cavernous, a shapeless throat, devoured her into its shadowy, strangling mass, the fierce spiritual agony of a dream. A curtain of impenetrable dread, the darkness hung around her cage of sense, as when the trees have turned to blotted shades, and the last friendly glimmer fades away. Around a bullock in the forest tied by hunters, close in no empty night.
Thank you.
Close is on.
We'll pause there. This first line, the rock gate's heavy walls were left behind. It alludes back to the previous canto when they were approaching the realm of death. And Sri Aurobindo described the scene A country was round them, strange far skies above. Weird were the grasses, weird the treeless plains. Weird ran the road, which like fear hastening towards that of which it has most terror passed. Phantasmal between pillared conscious rocks, somber and high, gates brooding, whose stone thoughts lost their huge sense beyond in giant night. Enigma of the inconscient sculptural sleep, symbols of the approach to darkness old, and monuments of her titanic reign, opening to depths like dumb, appalling jaws that wait a traveler down a haunted path, attracted to a mystery that slays. They watched across her road, cruel and still. Sentinels they stood of dumb necessity, mute heads of vigilant and sullen gloom, carved muzzle of a dim, enormous world. So that's how Sri Aurobindo describes this gate of entry into this world. But now they've passed through that gate, and those heavy walls were left behind, and now they enter into this kind of dreamy darkness where everything just seems to kind of slip and slide, half conscious. And it seemed to me perhaps to give a sense of what he's describing is at that moment when we are dying and entering into that darkness and emptiness of death, perhaps still barely conscious, but losing that awareness, that clearness of conscious thought, and we're descending into that dark realm. Something like that he's describing. But somehow she is keeping this light of her conscious being lit, but still descending into this darkness. And as he described earlier in the previous canto, here he describes also this kind of terrible mouth into which she feels herself entering, and monstrous, cavernous, a shapeless throat devoured her into its shadowy, strangling mass, the fierce spiritual agony of a dream. Well, it's not only just dark and empty, but also kind of horrifying at the same time. And then he describes this kind of beautiful but terrible image of a bullock tied to a tree as bait for the tigers to come. And as the night falls and the trees turn to blotted shades of darkness, and the bullock waits and perhaps senses the hunters closing in, but also the tiger. So that gives a sense perhaps of a little of how she feels entering into this terrible darkness. So we continue. The thought that strives, about halfway down.
The thought that strives in the world was here, unmade. Its effort it renounced to live and know, convinced at last that it had never been. It perished, all its dream of action done. This clotted cipher was its dark result. In smothering stress of this stupendous knot, mind could not think, breath could not breathe, the soul could not remember or feel itself. It seemed a hollow gulf of sterile emptiness, a zero oblivious of the sum it closed, an abnegation of the Maker's joy, saved by no wide repose, no depth of peace. On all that climbs here to be truth and God, and conscious self and the revealing word, and the creative rapture of the mind, and love and knowledge and heart's delight, there fell the immense refusal of the eternal no. As disappears a golden lamp in a gloom, borne into distance from the eye's desire, into the shadows vanished Savitri.
Thank you. Here, this empty darkness is contrasted with life and thought and consciousness, all of which are dissolving, disappearing, unable to be felt. Thought was unmade, it's no longer able to think, express itself, formulate. It perished. All its dream of action done. No more can we hope for any action. Mind could not think, breath could not breathe. The soul could not remember or feel itself. It seemed a hollow gulf of sterile emptiness. And an abnegation of the Maker's joy, of a canceling of all happiness that sustains our life in the world. Right. Yeah. That joy which sustains all life in the world cannot exist there. And there's no peace. There's no depth of peace, no wide repose, no rest. And love and knowledge and heart's delight, on all of that there fell the immense refusal of the eternal no. Yeah?
I experience these parts, and many people experience this also, this in this darkness and lost and no hope, no light also. And then how important is that here in Savitri it's get described and give us a hope and a guidance that there is light behind, that we come through. I think that is sometimes also then the darkness is there, goes through.
Yeah, this feeling of darkness and emptiness and loss of hope and loss of joy, these can also visit us in life as well. We feel depression, hopelessness. So we get tastes of it, yeah.
So is it, in some meditation process, sometimes when you go deeper, these kind of experiences happen. So as Savitri is descending into this world, fully conscious, unlike Satyavan who just died, that was, not of his choice, but she's kind of making a choice to enter this world. So is that what Sri Aurobindo is describing here? Something that somebody can experience in a meditation?
I think, we can take it something like that. I think ultimately he's describing something more ultimate than that, of the Divine Mother confronting the very existence of death, that finality which we all face as human beings in bodies. Our bodies come to an end, but she is confronting that kind of reality, or what seems to be a reality. But all of these, as Margaret was saying, death and the sense of darkness and emptiness and dread and terror and all these things, they have kind of reflections or entrances into our life as well. And so when we face that, like Margaret is saying, we can look at Savitri, who is persisting through that journey into the darkness and holds this light, which sometimes seems to be ready to flicker and die out. She holds it firm and persists through that. Now, in our meditations also, we may enter into such experiences. And again, there, because our soul ultimately is immortal, it persists through all of these states. So even when we face death, something within us will persist through that experience, pass through it, and perhaps it'll be just a kind of brief, momentary experience that we have, but then we move, as Margaret has often described, through this tunnel of darkness towards a light at the end, and then we can emerge again into the light, into the psychic realm of our soul. So all these experiences that are described here have reflections in our daily life and in our meditations and even in our experience of death. But she is facing here, as the Divine Mother, this dissolution of form, of the human body. And ultimately Sri Aurobindo and the Mother are aiming for a kind of a transformation of that body so that it will not have to undergo this dissolution, this passage into death, but could remain. So it's a more profound and fundamental change that they're describing. So we can continue. Oh no, maybe we have to stop now. So we'll play some music.
The woman first affronted the abyss, daring to journey through the eternal night. Armored with light, she advanced her foot to plunge into the dread and shoeless vacancy.
Thanks to Sri Aurobindo.